Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am making something absolutely ridiculous. It's been over 100 degrees here in Texas where I live, and I thought it would be fun to make something a bit refreshing. So we're going to make some ice cream. No, not out of milk and the other ingredients, sugar and flavorings. We're gonna make it out of EVA foam. I thought, why not make one of my monsterized characters? I've done it a few times on the channel. Definitely go back and watch those if you haven't seen those already. But I thought, why not make an ice cream cone with a split personality? One side could be melting in horror, and the other side could be like a nice kawaii style, smiley, happy-go-lucky thing. So today we are making an ice cream cone out of EVA foam. Refreshing. Let's get to building. So, I want my ice cream cone to be a little larger than normal because everything is supposed to be bigger in Texas, or that's what they say. As I was thinking of a base shape, I thought I could probably get a decent start using a plastic disposable cup. So I wrapped it in foil, then in duct tape, and I have the beginnings of a cone base. Once I have it covered, I draw my cut lines and some registration marks to help line them up when they are cut out of my foam. Now I'm going to cut the pattern off of the cup and trace it onto poster board. If you are making just one of something, this step isn't necessary, but I like to share my patterns with everybody, and this makes them flat and easier to scan on my computer. It's also at this point where I label parts, put angle cuts, decide on foam sizes, and make other extra marks for instructions. I make the ice cream part in a similar way, balling up some foil to the size I want, and doing the whole foil coverage and duct tape and marking stuff again. While I was at it, I also made a brim for the cone that sticks off about 2 inches from the top. I'm using some 6mm EVA foam for this build. The thinner foam allows for things to curve easier. Once built, this cone will stand about 10 or 11 inches tall, at least that's what I'm guessing, so it doesn't have to be too rigid. With my pattern in hand, I trace all the pieces onto the foam, then I cut them out with a sharp hobby knife, paying attention to the edges with inward, outward, or straight cuts. The cover page on my template explains all the markings and the colors for each piece. Assembly is pretty simple. There's only 5 parts that make up this entire build in foam. The 5th you'll see here in a minute. I put down a layer of contact cement on all the edges, let it sit for a few minutes, and when it's no longer wet, I begin tacking stuff together. My cone top ridge was a little too small, but I was able to stretch out the foam enough to get it to close shut. I'll lengthen this part in the template so that if you want to make this build yourself, you won't have to stretch out foam to get it to fit properly. Once I assembled the top dome, I realized that it was a little bit too big for my cone, so I added some darts on the bottom of it to make it come in a little bit. I think this addition makes the overall shape more like an actual scoop of ice cream. This type of ice cream cone is known as a cake cone or a wafer cone. It's similar in appearance to a waffle cone, at least with the pattern, but the structural differences are quite a few. The cone is smaller, it's lighter, and it has a flat bottom. Here I'm just adding some overlays to make it look more like the real thing. I cut out some triangle-shaped thin strips of 6mm foam to glue on the top ridge, and a bunch of thin flat strips of 2mm foam for the pattern on the bottom. When you get a scoop of ice cream, you often get that ridge on the bottom where you've overstuffed the scoop. I'm just going to cut out a jagged line into some 10mm foam on one side to mimic that mounding. I didn't template this piece out, but wanted to show you that it's just a random wavy line. You could do it without a piece of paper telling you how to make a wave line. I marked on my ice cream where the cone sat level with it, and will use that as my guide for where to put my flat edge on my ridge. I rounded over the edge by sanding it, not really worried about smoothing it completely, as I'm going to cover it with something later. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area while sanding EVA foam. You don't want to breathe the dust in. To cover up my seams, blend the transitions on my side ridge, and to sculpt a screaming face into one side, I'm going to use some foam clay. In particular, I'm using Foamo from Cosplay Apprentice. I wet down the clay foam to make it more pliable, and I also wet the surface of my EVA foam so it'll stick to it. Then it's just as simple as smearing across the surface, making a smooth thin layer over just the ice cream portion. Once I had it how I wanted, I added a drip on one side that I'm then going to sculpt a screaming face onto. On the opposite side, I'm just going to paint on the happy face. Two coats of Plastidip. I spray painted the cone base brown. Now, I could have masked off the top and spray painted it pink, but it was about 106 when I got home from work this day and decided I'm just gonna paint it with acrylic inside in the AC. Surprisingly, for a light color, I got a really good coverage on the first pass, then I just had to touch it up in a couple of spots, though it doesn't really matter as I'm going to cover it with something extra here in a minute to make my ice cream look eternally wet. I have used this trick a lot for adding blood effects on props, but I figured it would give a nice sheen to make the ice cream surface look forever shiny. I mixed up some 5-minute epoxy, added a little bit of that same pink acrylic paint, and slathered it across the surface. I then mixed up a second batch of a darker pink to put in the mouth and the eye holes. My last step was to paint on the kawaii anime style happy face on the opposite side with some more acrylic paint. To speed up the drying time, I hit it with a heat gun turned down to a low temperature, then added some white glares, teeth, tongue, rosy cheeks, all of that stuff. With that, my ice cream cone is now a two-faced mix of emotions. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty cool. I definitely like that there is a dual personality to my ice cream cone, conveying the ridiculous, scorching, melt-your-face heat and trying to stay positive at the same time. But yeah, maybe we'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to take a food item, turn it into a character, and not at all solve your problem of overheating. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. I'm actually lactose intolerant, so I'll let you have the first taste. It's probably going to taste like 5-minute epoxy. Yum, yum. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to continue to see builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.